Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a slightly different sort of video than what I normally do, and quite different from what we would normally do in the midweek slots. Let me try and explain a little bit of what's going on. In this video, I just want to talk about a few things, really. This is a sort of a combination of me tying up a bit of a loose end that got left on the channel a while ago, me talking about a few things with regards to what I think about the channel at the moment, and probably rambling an awful lot. I have a few ideas of what I want to talk about, but I don't have like a script or anything. I'm just going to ramble randomly, which is probably going to be very long-winded and boring, but you're going to have to put up with that. Yes, and this also sort of slightly coincides with the 1 year anniversary of the channel. You're probably thinking the 1 year anniversary of the channel was quite a while ago. Yes, it was. It was ages ago, back in the middle of May. But back in the middle of May, I was enormously busy and couldn't think of anything to do to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of the channel. However, I have thought of something to sort of celebrate the 1 year anniversary of the channel, and also to celebrate my birthday, because yes, it is not my birthday today, because I'm not recording this on the day that you're going to watch this. In fact, this probably isn't even published on the day you're going to watch this. But that is all beside the point. The point is, I'm uploading this on the 23rd of June, which is my birthday. It is my 20th birthday, and I will no longer be a teenager. What a travesty this ain't. But anyway, I'm rambling already. On my 19th birthday, back on the 23rd of June 2020, I uploaded a video called, what was it called? I teach English history for 45 minutes while playing an impossible game. I think that's what the video was called. And what happened was, I tried to play a game perfectly normally, as I often do, and it didn't go very well, because the game was enormously difficult. And to pass the time, I rambled on about English history. And before anybody mentions this, no, that is not an original idea. Yes, I did borrow it, and by borrow I mean steal it off somebody else. Yes, I did steal it off somebody else, and no, I'm not surprised if anybody mentions that. All you have to do is take 5 minutes looking at my channel and you realise I've nabbed almost everything off that man. But never mind. I didn't win that game, and that always bugged me. That always got under my skin as one of the only games that ever really defeated me. But that was before all of Saber Beast. And Saber Beast, speedrunning Saber Beast, took me 12 hours. I think it was 12 hours of work to get through that. Which was a nightmare. An absolute nightmare doing it. However, it struck me a couple of days ago that if I can dedicate myself to do 12 hours to speedrun Saber Beast, I can probably return to that game. So the next thing you're going to see is about 6 minutes of odd footage of me beating this game. And if this makes absolutely no sense to you, don't worry, because it almost undoubtedly won't make sense to anybody. But this is almost more for me than it is for anybody else. So, yes, enjoy this weird bit of footage that you're going to watch that ties up a little loose end that has been open on the channel for about a year, and then we're just going to sit back, relax, and just have a little chat about a few things. So, enjoy, and I apologise in advance for the dreadful singing. It's not very good, is it? We're only going 11 minutes. Took like 11 hours to get this frustrated in Saber Beast. I was so close. So close. I didn't have to go in the back rooms at all. Menaced by monsters who drive through us invincibly. And only one man who can save us. The man who can save us is me. I don't think that noise is him actually coming to kill you. I think that's just a scream. Well, spank my butt and call me Susie. Opera. In the space opera. Oh, in the space opera. Doopy doopy, doopy 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 doo. She's the girl from the fourth dimension. We met once, as I recall. I gave her my close attention. Then she came waltzing through my wall. Where's the front gate, for goodness sake? Why is there no front gate in this house? Who designed this place, and why were they allowed to live? Why were they not punched heavily with a large fish? Matters the Kerl. That's the wrong button. Up. So, I hope you enjoyed that absolute madness. Can't wait to look at the audience retention graph and just watch. That's what it's going to do. I can already predict it, but that's fine. What else would I expect from the insanity that I produce, eh? Anyway, so yes, I beat Phill. Phill beat Phill, which is probably going to end up being the title of this video, and it's probably going to enormously confuse people and only be differentiated by the fact that I spell it with 2 L's and the game spells it with 1. But, yeah, a couple of things that I want to talk about then. The first thing I want to talk about is the game itself, is Phill. Is the game that you've just seen me defeat after a year's hiatus from it. And I think the first thing I should probably do is talk about why I didn't win it the first time. I think the reason I didn't win it in the first time is partly because I was very fatigued by it. Because in the end I ended up playing it for something like 2 hours, that session. It was very long-winded, it was very unenjoyable, it was very not fun. And because I'd gotten so into the English history farce, I was so focused on that I wasn't really focusing on the game anymore, which obviously didn't help the situation and didn't help me actually win the game. And as much as having defeated Saber Beast's Brutal Mode and then speedrunning Saber Beast's Brutal Mode, as much as that did help me with sort of the persistence and the tenacity that's required to defeat something like that, it also did sort of help a little bit in my tactic to win the game. Because the game does require a degree of tactics, because there are a certain, just like Saber Beast, you have a map, you have a bad guy, there are a number of different items you have to collect, and they're in particular sort of spawn positions. 5 of them will be selected at random, and you have to go around and find the ones that it's decided to spawn the items at, pick the items up and take them back to the fuse box, and not die in the process. So, admittedly, you could say, "Oh, that's possibly the reason you want it now," and maybe you think, "Oh, well, I really like Saber Beast, so presumably I like that game as well because it operates in the same manner." No, I don't, because they both use exactly the same mechanic. Yes, they do, but Saber Beast does it properly. It does it interestingly. It does it intuitively. It does it excitingly, and that game. And the reason I'm constantly referring to it as that game is if I call it, if I say the reason that Phill does this badly, it sounds like I'm talking in the third person, which is really, really confusing. I mean, the reason I started playing it in the first place is simply just because it has my name on it. So I thought it would be, vaguely interesting to be a joke in there somewhere. Don't think I ever actually ended up making a joke using that, but that's beside the point. Saber Beast uses the mechanic in a very effective way, in a very a nice, fun way, and kitty aunt. And that game doesn't. I think that Saber Beast has a much higher sort of design level, in the sense that things are like thought out intelligently and stuff just isn't there like for the sake of it. And I didn't show you actually the very end of that game where it plays a clip which makes no sense, is meant to be an entire joke, and frankly doesn't work at all and is just a bit rubbish. And that's one of the, that sort of segues me a little bit into something else that I want to talk about regarding the channel. Previously in the past, I have been a little bit hesitant, shall we say. I've been a bit hesitant to be particularly explicit with my descriptions of games. Vast majority of the times, if I thought a game was not very good, I might mention that I don't think the game is very good, but it would be extremely rare for me to just basically hate on the game. Just say, this game is terrible, this game is awful. I never try to just do that in a baseless manner, but I have recently become an awful lot more willing to do that in what I at least think is a relatively sort of evidence-based, constructive manner to do that, and I've lost my fear over doing that. And I want to explain why my sort of hesitancy to do that in the first place. I want to explain where that came from in the very beginning. before explaining it any further. But yeah, the reason that I don't or didn't do that is because in the era when I was watching a lot of games on YouTube and not playing games on YouTube before I was on YouTube myself, in that era it was extremely common for there to be enormous fiascos about, oh, one person has said this and that's upset somebody else, and oh dear, it's the worst thing in the history of the universe. And if you've been on YouTube for any period of time, you probably know exactly what sort of era and what sort of people I'm talking about. But that was an absolute nightmare. It was an absolute mess. I hated seeing it happen, and I was thinking to myself the entire time, sheesh, if I ever do YouTube, I have got to avoid this happening to me, because it is such an absolute nightmare. I really shouldn't have shaved just before this, because I've got a hair stuck on the back of my neck which is driving me insane. That was a TMI that you didn't need to know and didn't want to know, but I told you anyway, because I'm just that kind of a moron. Where was I? Oh yes. That era of YouTube was something that I've always very much strived to avoid, and as much as I am still trying to avoid it, I'm always second guessing everything that I do in a way, just to make sure that I never accidentally end up in any kind of position which could ever possibly be construed to being a problem. And I know what you're possibly thinking, but that doesn't really happen that much anymore. Most of those people are gone. Nobody really cares about that kind of thing. Everyone's a bit more mature these days. What's the problem? Yes, I completely agree, but I work in a marginal sense. And I get that this is a very, marginal channel at the moment, but I don't want there to even be the tiniest potential chance that anything like that could ever possibly happen. So I'm trying to sort of cover my bets early, as it were, rather than just go, you know, hi-ho as much as I please and then try to fix the problems later. You know, I'm just trying to cover myself before. I'm trying to hunker down so that I don't get shot before the war starts, if you imagine that. I'm building a nuclear shelter before the Cold War begins, not after the Cold War begins. But anyway, recently I've stopped being as concerned about that and as bothered about that, and as that's the wrong button. What button did I press? Oh, I must have pressed. What button did I press? I pressed F instead of C. I'm a goose. I pressed the wrong button again. I'm not doing very well today, am I? It's because I'm trying to talk at the same time. Yeah, I've stopped being as much concerned about that, and I'm now quite willing to gripe and moan about a game which I genuinely think is bad. And I genuinely think that the Phill game is bad. I think it's poorly designed. I don't think it's particularly fun. I don't think it's particularly interesting. I don't think it's particularly original or unique. I don't really think it achieves anything. And most importantly, I don't think it's an enjoyable experience. I don't think that a person getting to the other end of that game will be particularly glad that they did get to the other end of that game. They won't be glad that they downloaded the game. They think, wow, this was a good experience, I'm glad I went through this. I don't think anybody would feel that way, and that's my baseline way of judging a game. If at the end of the experience I think, I'm glad that I went through this, then I think it's a good game. And if I get to the end of it and think, really rather wish I'd done something else in my afternoon, then to me that's a bad game. And you know, it's the same with all sorts of media. It's the same with movies, it's the same with books, it's the same with otherwise I said books because I haven't read a book for the sake of pleasure in years. But that's not the point. We're not focusing on the fact that I'm an uneducated twit. We're rambling on about absolute rubbish. But yes, I think it's also important at times, as much as I really enjoy putting out really good, enjoyable, fantastic games and showing off particularly what indie developers are capable of making when it's really good, I also think in a way sometimes it can be equally useful to show off what terrible stuff can be made as well. Because, and this is something which happened to me, when I was watching games on YouTube and only saw good indie games because that was all that was being put out, I was under the distinct impression that all indie games were good. Then I got into the indie market and actually realised, maybe they're not all quite as stellar as I imagined. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's nice to have that sort of roundedness, that sort of some good stuff, some bad stuff, some interesting stuff, some weird stuff, and it also, you know, helps keep variety up as well a little bit. Not that I particularly I don't know. It's a difficult thing to describe. It's not that I enjoy posting stuff that's bad, but I think that bad stuff has a place. it's like I'm going to get a little bit philosophical here. I don't, nobody enjoys being sad or being upset or going through difficult times, but sometimes going through difficult times can make it a little bit easier to more fully appreciate the good things in life. I don't know. And maybe I'm trying to do something vaguely similar with less good games on the channel. I don't know. I don't know what I'm dribbling on about, but I suppose that's one of the things that I just wanted to talk about a little bit, and just sort of explain and rationalise, because I think it's important, and it is a bit of a sort of a change that's come onto the channel. Not to say that you should begin to expect that I'm going to start pumping out loads of terrible games. Absolutely not. I'm still going to do my best to post 99 times out of 100 good, interesting, fun games that I think are worthy of your time, which is the crux of the whole thing. I don't like putting out stuff which I don't think is worthy of your time. I could go off on a big rant here about stuff, but as much as I'm happy to have a crack at games that I don't think are very good, I'm not going to start having a crack at individual people and certain philosophies and certain methodologies when it comes to doing YouTube that I personally disagree with, and I think are how to put this, counterproductive. I'm going to say that much. That's either a rant for another day or a rant that will never happen because I will perpetually be far too scared to do it. I don't know. But that also kind of leads me on to, again, I'm trying to sort of segue these things together vaguely logically. Talking about quality of games and wanting to make sure that the quality of games is respective of your time, as it were. I'm also trying, to a degree, to rework sort of the quality control measures on the channel a tiny bit with respect to the shotguns. And if you're vaguely new on the channel, you might not even know what a shotgun is, because one may not have actually come out in your sort of lifetime on the channel. But basically, if you're not familiar with them, and this again leads back into something I said before about nicking stuff, if you're not familiar with them, the shotgun is basically a thing which I do where I play a pair of indie games, usually indie horror games, but sometimes other sorts of things, sometimes shooters, sometimes platformers, blah 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 blah. A pair of games in a single video, basically. And there are various different reasons that I've been trying to do these, and I'm trying to be careful not to repeat stuff that I said in a previous video, where I just talked about the various sort of things on the channel and sort of try to justify a few bits and bobs and explain some stuff. Quite a long time ago, and that video ended up lasting about 2.5 hours. So it's quite difficult for me to remember everything that I said in it, but I'll try not to repeat myself too much. Basically, shotguns went off the channel for a while, due to me moving from mainly playing itch.io games to mainly playing Steam games, and I'm not going to justify like why I did that, because I think I'm going to do that in another video. I think I already have done that in another video at some other point. But basically, I've restored my faith a little bit, or itch.io has restored my faith in itch.io games a little bit more recently, and I'm going to try and get some more stuff back in it, because I really do. I like the shotgun as a format. I just think it needs to be fixed a little bit. I think there are a few little problems in the format and a little bit of, there's some potential there for improvement. I'm always looking for improvement. As much as I hate looking back at older parts of the channel and thinking, ugh, this stuff is really bad, I am glad that when I can say, oh, this isn't very good, what I can also say is it's not very good because it's better now, because something has changed. I've made some sort of improvement or some sort of fix which has improved stuff. And recently, last night even, I went back through all the old shotguns so that I could put timestamps in the descriptions for when the second game started, which is something I really ought to have done from the very beginning, but for some reason I never thought to do. So that if you're particularly, you see the title and you think, oh, I'm more interested in seeing the second game than I am the first game, or you just want to see the second game first, or whatever it is, instead of having to find it yourself, you can just go in the description and see the timestamp for when the second game actually starts. Which is something I should have done a while ago, but I didn't. And I finally got around to doing that last night. And when I was doing that, obviously I had to very briefly rewatch some of the old shotguns. And as much as I can remember the vast majority of them. Obviously, most of them were a very long time ago, and after making about 300 videos, it's difficult to remember each specific one of them. And while I had them all on mute, and because my internet was being very slow, I was loading them in 144 as well, so I could barely see anything, and I couldn't hear anything. But at the same time, it was a little bit... not... I mean, it was cringy and awkward. It's always cringy and awkward listening to myself. It's hard enough in editing. It's even more difficult after, in post-editing. But, I think throughout all the shotguns, I've tried to keep things thematically the same, or thematically linked in some manner. Perhaps not at the very beginning, but for a while at least, I think I've tried to do that. I'm honestly not sure sometimes. I'm honestly not sure what I'm thinking most of the time when it comes to the channel and it comes to games. But from now on, I'm going to try and keep them a lot more thematically similar. And the main reason that I would have been afraid to do that in the past is because if I sit on a recording for a while, waiting for another game to come along that's a bit more fitting and a bit more suitable to work with it, it can seem like you make a recording, but then you sort of sit on it for ages and it never really comes out, or it takes ages to come out, and then like one part of the video is like one era almost, and the other part of the video is like another era, because I don't know, like my humor's developed, or my style's developed, or my attitude is developed, I don't know, something like that. Which is always like a slight hesitancy of mine to sit on a recording for too long, and which has at times caused stuff to be booted out at times when probably it wasn't as beneficial to put it out then as it could have been to do it at other times. But yeah, I'm going to try and keep them a lot more thematically similar, the two games and the shotguns, from now on, because I think that's very important. And I think if I don't do that, it becomes a bit pointless. Because if it's just two videos in one, there's not really any purpose to that. I mean, sometimes I've put two videos out on a single day. Like when we played The Hospital, for example, which was the, not really the sequel, but the next project of the folks that made The Babysitter.
Ready for straight away.
When I did that, I also played a stealth game. And I knew that both of those games would not work together. I considered putting them into a shotgun. I considered having the two of them as a shotgun. But then I realised that that wouldn't make any sense, because one is a very story-based horror game which I have a sort of personal connection to, and the other one is, again, I don't have a personal connection to. It's not horror based, it's entirely stealth based, the visuals are very different, it's not really, I mean, there's a bit of story to it, but it's not a massive amount of story to it, blah 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 blah. They're extremely different games, but they were also both very good, and I didn't want to sit on them forever waiting for other stuff to come along, so I published them individually. So publishing two videos individually works, and publishing two games in a single video as a shotgun works, but having two games which are completely different in a single shotgun doesn't work, to my mind anyway. That just doesn't seem pointless. Why do that? Why not just release them as two separate videos, which makes far more sense. It's far easier for the audience to then find what they're actually looking for and enjoy it. And it also just makes sense, like in the continuity of things, like having one thing and then suddenly switching to something completely different in the same video, to me just doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to try and be a lot more careful and a lot more focused about keeping things really thematically similar as much as I possibly can in the shotguns from now on. I think that's really important, I think that's really valuable, and I think that will improve the quality of the shotguns as well. Another thing that I'd like to do with the shotguns, but I have no idea how able I'm going to be to do this. What I'd like to do is start evening them out a little bit more, because I noticed this, like with the very first shotgun, for example. It's like a 55-minute video.
Hello, let's go.
The
Sounds good.
first game is like 10 or 15 minutes, and then there's like 40 minutes after that of the second game. Now obviously you could argue, yes, the first shotgun was like the third video you ever made. You know, you didn't even, you hadn't come up with the concept of standalones by that point. Yes, all of that is true. But at the same time, what is also true is that that doesn't make any sense. And what is also true is that we're not talking about changing the past, we're talking about changing the future. So, what I would like to do, ideally, I'm also going to try and keep the shotguns a bit shorter. I'm ideally not going to ever really let a shotgun get more than about 45, 50 minutes, because again, at that point, I think it probably would be better at that point for one of those games to be a standalone and the other game to make up a part of a different shotgun rather than that particular shotgun. I'm losing my train of thought. Oh yeah, the balance. Sorry, completely lost my train of thought there. Sorry, where were we? Balancing games out in shotguns. Yeah, I don't like one game in a shotgun to be any, like, more or less than a third of the shotgun. Ideally, in an absolutely ideal world, it would be half and half to me. Like 50% of the video would be the first game and 50% of the video would be the second game. That would be absolutely ideal. However, games don't work that way, and the videos don't work that way, the channels, you know, that's just not how life works. Because, you know, these games very rarely have a predicted playtime, and even if they did have a predicted playtime, there's no reason to believe that that would be the same as how long it would actually take me to play it, rather than how long it took the developer to play it. And when you add in things like me talking about the game at the end, me introducing the game at the beginning, me getting stuck, me drivelling on about rubbish, all of that kind of stuff, all of those kind of predictions of length all go out the window anyway, so it would become completely pointless. So either I could make a video and say, I don't know, we'll invent like a hypothetical game. We've got a hypothetical game and it's like, I don't know, a game about massive yellow bunny rabbits, and it lasts 20 minutes. Do I wait, possibly for months, to find another game that is thematically similar to a game about massive yellow bunny rabbits, maybe a game that's about, I don't know, massive yellow porcupines or something, that's also 20 minutes long, and then put them together as a shotgun? Because that would make a very nice shotgun, that would make a very thematically similar shotgun that is also very nicely balanced in terms of length. That would be lovely, but is that practical? Is that something I can actually do, and is that something which isn't going to require making a recording and possibly not publishing it for half a year, or maybe even longer than that? Which is like a question I have, and I keep asking myself. So that's one potential option, or you can sacrifice a bit of the balance and a bit of the theme in order to make, like, the shotguns a bit more practical, a bit sort of easier to work with, because you don't have to sit on stuff for ages. But then you have games which are less thematically similar and can possibly end up being, like, more disbalanced in terms of the length, like only like a small part of the video is one game and then a massive part of the video is the other game. And the main reason that I'm focusing more on keeping the theme similar is, even if the balance of the time allocated to each game is not enormously equal, I think if the games are more thematically similar, it won't matter as much, because it's like the whole video is about like one overarching concept, like stealth or shooters or Greek mythology or whatever. It won't really matter quite as much, because if they were half and half, they're both 20 minutes long, and the shotgun ended up being 40 minutes long, but then the games were thematically completely different, that wouldn't really work. But if there's two games, maybe one of them's 10 minutes long, the other one's 30 minutes long, shotgun's still 40 minutes long, but they're thematically similar, it makes a bit more sense to me. I don't know. It's difficult. It's difficult for me to sort of make these decisions and figure out what I'm going to do, because I never really know what's coming next when it comes to the channel. I never know what games are going to play next, I never know what videos they're going to turn into. I'm trying to like make plans and make decisions and have like rules of thumb and methodologies to work with when I don't really know what it is I'm actually going to be working with, even, you know, next week, which is a little bit of a problem, and it makes things rather difficult to plan with. But I'm sort of muddling through, doing my best. And what also makes it difficult is that I don't get, because of the size of the channel currently, I don't get an enormous amount of feedback. And sometimes I do, you know, sometimes we get people who comment and you know, they give lots of interesting feedback, and it's really useful for me. It boosts my motivation, it helps me really figure out what people like, what people enjoy, am I doing stuff good, is there things I could change? And when that happens, it's really great. And I really, really do appreciate it when people do give feedback. And if you've ever given any feedback, thank you so much. It really does help. I know it's a bit of a cliche, you know, like companies and everything else constantly witter on about feedback, but feedback is actually really useful when you're trying to produce something, particularly in the entertainment business, where you're trying to make something to make people happy. It's not just about, here is a Hoover, does it make rugs clean? Yeah, well then people will probably like it. In entertainment, it doesn't work that way. You know, even if it's something as little as like making a joke, will that actually make them laugh? Maybe it made me laugh. Maybe I laughed my head off at that joke. But will it actually make anybody else laugh? You need feedback to work that out. So, yeah. At this current stage of the channel, when everything's really unpredictable, I mean, things will perpetually be unpredictable, and I don't have an enormous amount of feedback regarding the shotguns, they're sort of tricky to work with, it's tricky to make these sorts of plans, but I'm doing my best, and I'm hoping that this sort of video, as much as I'm probably droning on enormously, I'm hoping that this sort of demonstrates that, and it's also helping me to sort of get my thoughts a bit clearer. But, anyway, to try and sort of summarise what I'm thinking about the shotguns right now, I want to make them more thematically similar. I'm going to try and keep them a little bit shorter, probably most of them being around 30 to 40 minutes long, 30 to 45 minutes long, hopefully not getting any longer than that. I'm going to try, if at all possible, to keep the length of them more balanced, and I'm going to make sure that they remain as thematically similar as possible, because I think that's very important, I think that's very useful, as I've just spent the last 20 minutes saying. And what else? Well, I suppose one other little thing I could say actually is one of the reasons I'm happy to focus more on theme rather than time is because previously I didn't have like when most of the shotguns started, when like the first half of all the shotguns came along, I didn't really have a lot of flexibility on the channel with sort of what, in a sense, I could produce, what I could actually put out. But now I have a lot more flexibility, because if I produce something that's like 6 or 7 minutes long, or 10 minutes long or something, it can go out as a midweek piece. And if I produce something that's, you know, an hour long, it can go out as a normal video, as a standalone. If I produce something that's like 15 minutes long, it can go into a shotgun, and then it can be, you know, that can make up a video. Or if something's like 25 minutes long, and you know, it doesn't seem to like feel very suitable for a shotgun, then maybe I can release that as like 2 individual videos at the same time. You know, I have a lot more flexibility, which is why I'm going to try and focus more on keeping the themes right. Because I feel if the theme is right, and I have this additional flexibility regarding timing of different stuff on the channel, then maybe I can make the shotguns mean a bit more. And the whole reason of me wanting to focus on that, the whole reason of me wanting to invest time in making the shotguns work, is because I really do like the shotguns. I think they work as a concept. I think they're a fun idea. And I think that they're a nice thing to have, and they're a very core part of the channel. You know, they've been around since the very beginning. With Subnautica ending a month or so ago, shotguns are kind of the only thing that have been going since the very beginning, with the exception of me. And even saying that, you know, I'm very, very different to how I was a year ago, which is kind of not a bad thing and not a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing in the sense that I feel it's better. You know, as I've said before, I feel like every like sort of month on the channel, quality goes up in some manner. I get better at, you know, my attitude, my humour, like style, professionality, editing techniques, yada yada yoopty. I feel like all of that slowly improves over time. What that does, however, mean is that I kind of have this big stock of videos now, which I don't personally think are worth watching. Like there's some classics in there, don't get me wrong, there always are with these sorts of things. I think there's like a good handful of videos on the channel which are really, really good, and I'd like to think that most of the recent stuff has been pretty good. But obviously, going back through all the shotguns when I was putting the timestamps in, not just thinking about like the theme and the balance of the lengths, it also just gave me the opportunity to realise how much I have actually developed myself, and kind of how rubbish some of the stuff used to be, which is fine. You know, it's perfectly understandable and expected that things would be a bit weird and a bit squiffy and wouldn't quite make sense at the beginning. I'm sure that's the way that it works with the beginning of every YouTube channel and every person who enters the entertainment business. But yeah, I just worry that people come onto the channel and they see some of the old stuff and they think, wow, this is terrible. I'm like, yeah, I agree, but give the newer stuff a chance. I don't know what I'm yakking on about. I'm whittering on about stuff, and it's getting really warm in here because we're reaching the peak of the evening heat, and I really need to stop recording at this time of day. But yeah, I don't know. Was there anything else I wanted to talk about? I don't know, really. I think that's the vast majority of the things I wanted to talk about. I think I suppose one thing I suppose I possibly should mention, which is probably going to interest absolutely nobody, but I have no intention whatsoever of restarting or bringing back the story time with Phill concept that we had running for a while. I don't know how, I can't remember how much. I definitely did talk about it in that other video where I talked about the channel for just hours on end, but I can't remember how much I talked about it, and I can't remember exactly what I said and what decisions I'd made at that point. But concurrently, I have no desire, no interest, and no plan to bring any part of that series back, because I don't really think it... I think it sort of worked. I don't know how well it blended with the other stuff on the channel. I don't personally think it ever worked really well, because it was meant to be a blend. It would have worked better if it would have been funnier, and it would have worked better if it had been pre-written. But pre-writing stuff I find immensely boring and unsatisfying. I find improvised comedy an awful lot more fun to do. It's like when I'm reading the description of a game or the write-up of a game, I'll often think of something. I think, that's a joke I could tell. But then I find that I don't actually ever make that joke in the actual game itself, because I don't know what it is about me, but pre-written humour just doesn't work for me. Improvised humour and wit just seem to work an awful lot better for me. I don't know why, but I don't know. Maybe it's just my sense of humour. Maybe it's just the way my brain works. Maybe I'm just a lunatic. I have absolutely no idea. But I mean, you'll notice that sometimes, like at the very beginning of a game, just like on the menu screen, I will try to make a joke out of like the title or some pre-written thing in the description, and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't come off. It's just not me. So I wanted for that storytime with Phill idea to sort of work and to be funny. I think it would have to be pre-written, because it was constantly being dragged down by the slightly squiffiness of the improvisedness, because sort of my improvised humour works in sort of very small chunks. It's like a small joke out of a small thing. It can't be like a funny story. That just sort of doesn't work for me. Maybe it's just humour I'm not very good at telling. I don't know. But yeah, at the end of those, I wasn't massively enjoying doing those. There were a lot of work to do, and in the end I was never particularly proud of them, because I wanted them to be improvised, but they didn't really work, and I'm not convinced they were all that suitable for the channel. So it was an experiment. It was an interesting experiment. The ones in the middle I personally think are terrible. The ones at the beginning and the ones at the end of like the 6-part, well, it's not a series, but it might as well be a 6-part series. Most comedy series are 6 parts, so we'll pretend it was a series. Yeah, I think the stuff in the middle is pretty terrible. The stuff on either end is alright. But yeah, that, in case anybody was ever wondering, no, that won't come back. I'll continue to still occasionally do random little sort of silly ideas and silly sketches from time to time that works. And like, to typify the whole like improvised versus pre-written thing, that "Hello Precious" joke that I did out of the spam emails, which if you haven't seen, don't worry, it's not worth watching. But in essence, I basically tried to do a pre-written comedy to sort of test myself and see what would happen with it, and again, it didn't really work. It was alright, nothing to write home about in my personal opinion, but again, it was a decent idea, but pre-writing jokes just doesn't work for me. But yeah, that isn't really going to be coming back at any point. Again, I may still do other little comedy ideas if I come across them, or ever think up things and I genuinely think it might be working, but I think in terms of like the silly comedy stuff, I'm a lot happier with the outtakes videos. I'm a lot happier with using them to sort of scratch that particular comedic itch of mine, because they are pre-written in a sense, but they're sort of pre-written in a way that doesn't hamper the delivery, because the delivery of the whole thing is already done. It's a joke that's been made in a video that didn't turn out to be good enough to go on the channel, so it went in the outtakes folder. And then I make a joke out of that. But the delivery still works, because the delivery is fully improvised, and it's relatively small, because it's lots of little small chunks of comedy rather than one long string of comedy. So I think the outtakes videos work a lot better to scratch sort of the silly comedy itch that I wanted to do on the channel from the beginning, because I never wanted the channel to purely just be games. I very much enjoy doing games. I think they should be, and they always will be, the backbone of the channel. But around that, I would also like to do some other little odds and ends, and I think the outtakes videos are a very good way of me doing that. Not just because they allow me to make some productive use, out of footage of failed games that I don't think were actually going to be good enough to go up on the channel. So, yes, I think that is probably about... I've probably droned on for nearly an hour, which is quite a terrifying concept. But, yeah, I think that's most of what I wanted to talk about, really. Yeah, so I don't know if one thing I probably also should mention, actually, it never struck me to mention this, but because this is more about like the future of the channel rather than the past of the channel, I guess it makes sense to say it at the end. The reason I uploaded the original time I played the Phill game on my birthday last year was because it seemed a very weird and different sort of video to anything I'd ever done, because previously at Purely Games that was like my foray into trying something a bit different, a bit sort of more comedic, and actually think it was worth putting out on the channel. And whether it is or not, I leave up in the hands of other people. I am not going to say whether that video is good or bad, because I don't really have an opinion on that video. It's just a thing that exists, and I barely remember half of it because it came out literally a year ago. But yeah, I put that out on my birthday because I just thought it's a weird day, so why not have a weird video? And this is the same thing that's happening here. I'm not just doing it because it's been exactly a year since the publishing of that video. That's part of the reason, obviously, but also because, I don't know, maybe it's developing into like a bit of a tradition that on the 23rd of June on the channel, each time there's something a bit weird or a bit different or a bit odd going on. I don't know, but yeah, and I suppose also it gave me the opportunity to sort of link in a little bit with the 1 year anniversary of the channel, even though that was back in the middle of May. I don't know. I couldn't think of anything to do. I couldn't think of anything like fun or special or unique to do at all. This was the closest thing to it that I could find. So, yeah. So, I think that's about everything. That's about everything I wanted to talk about. Sorry for talking your ears off for a very long time. I do not look forward to going through this in editing. To find that one moment where I lost my train of thought. I really should like write down like a timestamp. If I lose my train of thought and think, I need to do a jump cut, I should like write it down on a piece of paper. That would save me a lot of time in editing. But I don't do that because I'm a twit, as you probably mentioned, or as you probably noticed during the past 50 minutes or however long it's been. So yeah, I think that's everything I want to talk about. Thank you very much for listening to me drone on. I don't know whether any of that makes sense or any of that is interesting or pertinent. If you do have any thoughts about the shotguns or the comedies or anything, really, anything at all, I'm always I don't really mention this. I sort of take it for granted that people think this or people realise this. I probably should mention this a little bit. I'm always extremely open to like communications and feedback. I'm always interested to hear what people are thinking, what people want from the channel, what people like on the channel, what people don't like on the channel, how people think stuff should develop, what people think of decisions I've made or decisions I'm going to make, that kind of thing. I'm always, I might disregard what you say and disagree with you. Absolutely, I might disregard what you say and disagree with you, but that doesn't mean I don't want to hear it. And 99 times out of 100 I probably will agree with you and probably think that your thinking is a lot better than mine. It's because, as I mentioned previously, I'm a cretin. But, yeah, if you do have any thoughts, I'd be fascinated to hear them. But, I think that is about everything. I think that's everything I wanted to say. I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. So, yes, thank you very much for joining me this evening, ladies and gentlemen, for me rambling on about a load of stuff. It's nice to have that loose end of the Phill game finally tied up. I really wish it had a better ending than it did, but it didn't. Pretty terrible ending, in my personal opinion. I think it was meant to be a bit of a joke and a bit fun, but if a game's that hard, I don't really feel like a joke is what you want at the end of it. It's like an exam. If you get to the end of an exam, you don't want a joke. You want a cold shower and a sandwich. Ideally not at the same time. I don't know. Anyway, thank you very much for joining this evening, ladies and gentlemen. Look after each other, and good night.